The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. I'm Steve Dunn. To find out more about the Charlotte Ledger, visit thecharlotteledger.com. I am joined today by Joanna Beck, founder and CEO of Beck Insights, a company that transforms chaotic operations into structured profit machines. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you.
A big part of your process involves making small changes that deliver big results. How did you develop that insight, and what are some of the best examples of the success that you've observed in that regard?
So I've always looked at things, even from a young age, as this can be done better. And, I'll walk into a restaurant, I'll walk into whatever, and just look around and say, this could be done better. I don't know if it's just born from impatience or what, but I have an engineering degree. And so I look, I'm solving problems. I always look at things about how to make it run better. And so that's where it was born. And just working inside, I have about, I think it's almost a 20-year career internal to corporate and other companies before I went out on my own. So it was probably also born of the frustration of having to deal with that, and then being able to go to a smaller company and say, in my experience, this would work better. And so they try it and it works. One of the things I can think of off the top of my head is, and this is probably going to sound so stupid, but the CEO of a client, the owner, and she was copied on every single email because that's how they kept her updated. And that was fine when they were a small, business, a couple of projects. It was a construction firm, and it was not working. And so she was overwhelmed. She couldn't pick things out. And so I looked around the room at, her project manager. I said, take her off your emails. I said, she doesn't need to know about, I received the subcontractor's pay app. She doesn't need to know that. What she needs to know is when the whole pay app is done and she needs to review it and sign it. That's what she needs. And so for her, it was just like a huge weight off her shoulders. And for the people who work for her, they said it was a game changer, right? We didn't have to wait for her to respond, or we didn't have to do this, and we could keep moving forward. So it's little things like that, and looking at things and understanding that, yes, your company's very successful. You've been doing this a long time. I mean, that company was started by her father, and then she took it over, and it's very successful. And things that worked when you were smaller or in the beginning, or when you didn't have as many employees, just they're not working now. And we need you to step back and realize that. And your role as the owner is different than your role when you were working for someone else.
Well, scaling up a business, I'm sure, presents a whole host of challenges all in their own. I'm interested in this sort of big picture versus little picture dynamic a little bit. And one of the examples, and I think it was you who illustrated this somewhere, is like if you're running a marathon or something, you can train and you can watch your nutrition, you can get plenty of sleep, and you can be ready. But on that day, if you've got a pebble in your shoe, it's going to impact your performance no matter how prepared you are in every other regard. And it seems as though you really focus a lot in your communications about finding those little things that can deliver an outsized impact. And one of the ones that you just gave us was let's make sure that we're not copying the owner of the business on every single email about every little thing. I wonder how do people receive those communications? Like, do you encounter resistance from folks who feel as though they've been successful and they don't want to mess with what works? Or are you there because the client is ready to have a conversation about making change?
So, and this may be a horrible analogy, but a lot of business owners, by the time I get there, it's kind of like they're alcoholics, and first they have to admit they have the problem before they can get help. And so if they're not willing to admit they have a problem, I can't help them. But once they say, I need a change, and they're all in some kind of transition when they bring me in, and whether they bring me in or another advisor to them, a financial advisor or an insurance person or a CFO, somebody recognizes that it's not working. And they know that this owner has goals that they can't meet unless we make some change. And so then I come in and I make the change. I don't make the change, but I encourage the change and I push. And a lot of times it's easier to hear that stuff. You may be hearing it internally. And I sit with the employees and we talk about what's going right, what's going wrong, what they want to change, what they think should be changed. And sometimes it's just me walking in and saying, stop doing this. Or, we need to fix this, something like that, where they'll hear it from someone outside and say, okay, well, maybe now I do need to follow this. And it's not, and sometimes I'll say stuff that no one internally has suggested, right? I'm not, this isn't rocket science. I'm not that kind of engineer. And so, they have to be willing for the help, and their employees sometimes will complain. I had a client that said that they would come into their office and complain, and the client would say, go talk to Joanna. I don't want to hear this. If you have
do you
a
ever
problem
feel
with
like
it,
you're
go
wading
talk to her.
into office politics though? Like,
My gosh.
So yeah. So what I'm wondering is, when you're doing what you're doing, how much of it in terms of balance is finding the solution from a process standpoint versus getting buy-in for that solution, communicating to the people about the need to do it and what needs to be done. It's probably all of the above. But I wonder, as you approach your work, sort of what you consider the biggest challenges and how you overcome them.
There are some people who don't think it should change. Some people, I've had experience with employees that just won't let go of things, right? This is mine. This is how I do it. Sometimes we will show them, the benefit of letting go, because there's a better way to do it. And then that will free you up to work on things that are more enjoyable for you or that provide better return for the company, that kind of thing. Sometimes, and it's rare, but we do in the work recognize that some employees just are not a fit. And the owners that I work with have recognized it, but they're worried about getting rid of somebody because then I'll have a big hole, right? Who's going to do that? And it's easier after I come in because we document their operations, that when you bring a new employee in, they can get up to speed a lot faster with what we've done already. And they understand their role and they understand what needs to be done and the frequency of getting that done. But they get comfortable with you and they talk to you about things that, may not be working internally, or they may tell you, kind of share that maybe their skills aren't what they had on their resume.
Find a way to let you know that.
Yeah, or you just observe it, and it's like, and then I speak to the owner or HR, and I'm like, what did their resume say they were able to do? And then it's like, that's not.
It seems like a lot of the
observing.
situations that you're walking into, though, like could be potentially fraught, right? Like you're coming in and you're kind of looking over somebody's shoulder and evaluating how they're doing.
Oh, no, I don't evaluate how they're doing.
Yeah.
I evaluate what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
And then we talk about it and document it. And I do ask questions. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing it that way?
Right.
Have you ever thought about doing it this way? And
Right.
why or why not, right? Maybe they're just not, and a lot of times it's just upskilling somebody, right? Maybe their Excel skills aren't where they should be. But if you teach them how to use some formulas or give them like a online training, it'll be better. Or maybe it's revising some forms. Like if you send stuff out to a client that's in Word documents and they're trying to fill in the answers, right? And you know how in Word, like if you draw a line where they're supposed to answer and then they type and then the line moves.
Yeah.
That's not a good, at least for me, that's not a good client experience. So let me teach you how to make a PDF form with fillable fields and, things like that. So I'm not, we don't come in and slash and burn and cut people. That's not what we get hired to do. We come in and just help people do things easier, increase their skill set, that kind of thing.
Do you ever run into a situation though where like half the team agrees with you and the other half disagrees, and they're looking to you as sort of like the umpire to decide who's right?
Right, and then we talk about it. I mean, it's probably a lot about what you do, right? With mediation, it's why do you think this won't work? Why do you not want to do this? Why do you not want to change? Sometimes they're scared. A lot of people are afraid of change. Things are going to change. I'm not going to have a role anymore, or that kind of thing. So then we just go through it and we let them experience it and say, let's just try it this way. If it doesn't work, that's great. We've learned that it doesn't work. So let's move on and evaluate a better way to do it. If this is not the better way to do it, then let's find the better way to do it, because what you're doing is not the most efficient way of doing things.
In terms of the special sauce that makes you successful and that makes Beck Insights helpful to its clients, how much of it do you think is the substantive stuff, like you should be using PDFs with fillable forms, versus the I'm going to help you get your people on board with doing things in a more efficient and more productive sort of way.
I mean, the little things like fillable forms, that's like maybe 5% of what we do.
Right.
A lot of it is just thinking through things and problem solving and looking at things and looking at it with an outsider's point of view and saying, why do you do that? Let's make it better. And then it is a lot of the employees are frustrated. I mean, if the owner's frustrated with the chaos, the employees are frustrated too, right? They're overworked or things aren't working. So it really does trickle down from the top. I haven't really had I have had some obstinate people, but when people are resistant to change and the company wants to move forward, then the company needs to make a decision, right? And I'll work with them as much as I can. Well, let's figure it out this way. Maybe there's a better way to do it, or maybe, this is easier, right? And now you can spend more time doing something you enjoy, like a problem solving or dealing more with customers or whatever it is that you like to do or is in your role. But, sometimes I've always looked at it this way. And in my career, when people have worked for me and I've had to let people go in a corporate setting, if they're not happy, if they're not doing their best work, they're probably not happy. And if they're not happy, maybe they can be happier somewhere else, right? That's how I look at it. It's not, let's release their talents back to the market or, that kind of thing. Because I know from a personal experience, the happier I am with a job, the better I perform. And so if I'm not performing well, then I usually look at myself and say, why am I not, what's going on? Or why am I getting this feedback that I'm not doing well? And so it's, I'm not happy because it's this reason, right? And so then, you help people be happier because their jobs are more rewarding.
It's interesting to me. I thought we were going to be focusing a lot more on like these engineering type process oriented, like little tweaks that you can make, right? Like that. But a lot of what we're talking about is helping people.
The people are the process, right? It's not, I'm not working with robots. I'm not working with AI. I'm working with people. And it's how they do what they do and why they do it that way. And whether it's, I've worked for accounting firms, which are very regulated, as you know. And so sometimes when you ask the question why, and it's like, because that's the law, right? We can't.
We're not going to change that part of it. Right.
And then sometimes it's, that's the easiest way for me to do it. Or that's, okay, well, let's explore that, right? Why is this the easiest way for you to do it? And maybe it's, that's just their training or so. People drive the process. And my friends would laugh because a lot of times I just will look at someone and go, I don't like people, right? Like I just can't, in the outside world. But when you are working with these companies and these employees and these owners, you really get to be part of, because I will come in and I've worked in a warehouse. I've gone on sales calls. I've helped fulfill orders. I went out to a job site for a construction company once just to talk to some of the guys, and they ended up having to go out to lunch. And having worked in construction, I understand. I'm like, it is lunchtime. This is a good time for you to break. Go. I don't get paid by the hour. Do not worry about me waiting for you to come back. And then it turns out that an inspector and some other people showed up. But having worked in construction, I kind of pushed things forward and said, well, this is what they need to do. And I had talked to the superintendent. I knew what the job was and what they were trying to do. And it's like, well, they asked us to do this. I'm like, okay, then what's stopping you from doing that, right? Oh, well, we need to go to Lowe's. Then go to Lowe's and get the part and go. And so they left. And then when the crew came back and I told the superintendent, he just burst out laughing. And it's like, you told them to go to Lowe's? And I said, well, that's what they told me they needed to do to fix your problem. So that's the logical answer is go to Lowe's and get what you need and come back. So, he's like, okay. And I said, just to let you know.
Is every engagement its own unique thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But do you have any sort of tricks of the trade that you find yourself employing again and again? Do you have any sort of favorite tips for the challenges and ways of overcoming challenges that you just sort of see everywhere?
It's like, what they say, every happy family is happy in the same way, but every unhappy family is unhappy in a different way.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's the clients I deal with. Things aren't working for different reasons. And,
so when you come in, is it always, you use the phrase chaotic and that's what you're trying to help solve, right? You're trying to help work through chaos.
Yeah.
Are you always coming into a situation where there's a big problem, or do you ever encounter companies that are that feel like everything's pretty good, but they are looking to maybe optimize in some way?
I did. I was brought in, so I mentioned working for the accounting firm. They were pretty well run, but they had just acquired, I think, another firm, and it was like, we need to clearly educate. This is how we do things here, and these steps and these processes. And in the process of that, I would say, why are you doing that? Or have you thought about this, right? Not, how about you break the law and do it that way? But so that was an easier one. But the one, the smaller businesses where the owner's involved in the day-to-day and they're looking to make a change, that, there's, and in my proposal outlines this and my contract outlines this, is that they identify where I go first, right? And I liken it to...
Yeah, there's a reason you're there,
yes,
right?
There's a reason I'm there.
Right.
And so I liken it to, you may have a limp and you have been limping for 20 years, but you recently got stabbed. And so if you go to the hospital, are they going to fix the limp or are they going to fix the stab wound, right?
Right.
We need to triage what the problem is. And in peeling back the layers of the onion, then that's where we find the cause of the limp, right? Maybe it's the pebble in the shoe that's causing the limp, right? So, it's and a lot of times they have the knowledge of, I want to get out of, like, I'm doing this and I don't want to do this anymore, or this isn't working. Like, we're not getting paid on time. Okay, well then let's figure out why you're not getting paid on time, right? So, and I paid for myself with a client once, I think, because that was the first thing we hit, and money started coming in, and she could pay for me because money wasn't coming in before. Is
it important to draw a line between your services and overall profitability of the company? Because you do kind of pitch that as well. Like, we're going to overcome chaos and create profit processes, or something along those lines. I'm sorry, I'm butchering your verbiage on your website, but do you ever get that question, sort of like, or is it a part of, or defining success, I guess, like measuring results? Like, how do you communicate that to your clients?
So some of them are very subjective successes, right? So the client that can now go to the beach house on the weekend and leave on Thursday instead of never going, that can't be measured in dollars. The other thing is that I have worked with a financial advisor who has a tool called Discovery. And so and what that does is it evaluates not only kind of their financial position, it gives them just a valuation, but then also through the questionnaire, here are the things that if you work on them, here's the monetary value you will get from doing that. And so we had a shared client, and their valuation, let's just say it was like, I don't know, $1.5 million. And then after working with me for a little over a year and making some other changes, we switched out her accountant, her attorney, and a few other things. She redid the valuation and it came back, I'd say 3 million or more. So she had gone up at least 2x from working with us because things were more streamlined. They were able to do things better. And so I'm not in the weeds with their financials. So I'm not going to, like, don't give me access to your accounting system. Like, that is, like, I'm not an auditor, like an accountant who looks at your books and all this stuff. I'm like your mechanic. And I come in and, if it's making a funny noise, let's find the funny noise. If it's not breaking or it's not, turning, let's figure that out. And so then it's, you're doing things at a better rate. You're doing things more efficiently, which means you can bring on more customers. Or you can, if you're a construction company, you can bid another job. Or you can move into private work if you're only doing public bids, right? It opens up a capacity. And so, with things like that, right? If let's say you do landscaping and you're able to bring on either one more big commercial client or 5 more residential clients, like, that's a different value. Or if you're in construction and you can now bid, you're more comfortable bidding private work than you were before. That's different than bidding public work. So I can't tell people, oh, I'm going to 2x this. In my experience, yes, I've had that. You can talk to my previous clients and talk about your experience with me. But yeah, I'm not going to guarantee you a dollar value.
Can I make a suggestion? I think that you can put a dollar value on intangible things. And I say that because it's a big part of my own work. So a lot of times in my own work, we're negotiating the value of a dispute, or a settlement of a dispute.
Yes.
What's the price of dismissing the lawsuit?
Yes.
And the law recognizes that dollars are the only remedy that we have in a lot of contexts.
Right.
So like if somebody's been injured in an accident or something, and there's no natural connection between a broken leg and a number of dollars. There's factors like your medical bills. Those are easy to quantify, but there's things that are difficult and sometimes impossible to quantify.
So you're asking me to quantify things that are difficult and impossible?
I'm asking you to ask the client to think about
What's
the
this worth
value
to
to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's what is the value of being able to go to the beach house on Thursday on a regular basis when you're currently not going at all? There is monetary value to it, and there's a lot of ways of thinking about it. One of them would be the value of time, somebody's time. Like, well, what is your time worth?
Right.
And if you have more time, if you're a CEO person, you're easily hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars an hour in terms of your annual comp divided by how much you're working or whatever. So it's kind of easy to measure your time. And if you got a free day, you can sort of tell like what that's worth, to you.
Right.
But then there's like the value of your peace of mind, the value of an uncluttered mental space, right? I think if you get people thinking about that, a huge part of my shtick as a mediator is to suggest to people that whatever value they're attributing to those kinds of things is probably too low. They're probably, if you really thought about it, like, how much would you, an easy way of thinking about it, for example, I saw some guy on an Instagram reel the other day who put this proposition to people on the street. If I offered you $10 million, would you accept it? Right? And the answer most people say is yes. Yes, I would. I would take your $10 million. All right.
I would ask, what do I need to do in return?
Well, but then the follow-up question is, okay, but the condition is that you don't get to wake up tomorrow. Like, this is your last day on Earth. Like, do you still accept the $10 million? And everybody says no, right? And so the guy's point, very bluntly made, is, okay, your ability to wake up tomorrow morning is worth more than $10 million, right? And so, and thinking about things in those ways can be a really useful exercise in the overall value of a proposition, right? Like you get this number of dollars, but you also get this intangible stuff. And if you measure the intangible stuff in dollars, if you find a way of conceiving of it in dollars, then you can realize that the overall value of the proposition is a lot higher than you thought. And it's not a trick, it's actually true. So I'll write it up. I'll send it to you as a proposal. Well, you're here in Charlotte. Mm-hmm. You've been in Charlotte now 18 years or so.
I moved here in July of 2007.
2007.
Yes.
All right. So you've seen Charlotte change and grow, but not as much as some people who are the small fraternity of people who were born and raised here.
The unicorns.
Yeah, there's not too many of them, but maybe a growing number. I don't know. But both of my kids are native Charlotteans, right? But what drew you to Charlotte in the first place, and what keeps you here now?
So I came down here. I was in business school at the University of Michigan, and before that, I had been working in construction in Las Vegas. And I wanted to move back to the East Coast. Friends and family had said, come back, you're too far. And so while in business school, I owned a house in Las Vegas. And previous to living in Las Vegas, I'd lived in Boston and in the Washington, D.C. area, two places where I could not afford, as a single woman, to buy a house on my project manager salary. In Las Vegas, I could. This was 2000. I bought my house in 2001, I believe. And so I knew I wanted to move back to the East Coast. I wanted to live somewhere where I could afford to own a home, which is basically south of the Mason-Dixon line, actually south of D.C. And so just talking to some friends at business school, and, people were throwing out, what about Nashville? What about Charlotte? What about, Atlanta? And so somebody said, Charlotte's really appealing because, in 2007, you've got, and being in business school, you look at, Fortune 500 companies, where can I work, that kind of thing. And so Charlotte had banking, Charlotte had other things. And so I came down here we had a fall break, and I came down here and I stayed with a friend of a friend and, drove around the city and just explored it and said, this is a this is a nice place. It's, I was not, when I graduated from college, I moved to Boston. I did not move to New York. New York was too big for me, just too many people. And, I got the same thing from Charlotte. This is really easy, easy to navigate. This is a nice city, pretty, it's clean, it's very green. And so I decided to focus my job search down here, and Bank of America brought me down like many, many residents of Charlotte. Thank you, Bank of America. I'm still a customer. And so, I came down here and I worked for Bank of America for 7 years. And then I went to a software company that was here. And then I went to a data company that had been bought by the London Stock Exchange. I mean, all these opportunities here in Charlotte. I built a home here. I built a 3-story townhouse that was probably twice the size. It's about 2,500 square feet, 3 stories, 3/4 of a mile from my driveway to the Greenway. It's a mile from my house to the light rail. You would think it would cost less than what I sold my house for in Las Vegas. Now it's now worth more, just because thank you, Charlotte real estate. But, I could really, it was what I wanted. It was the affordable place. I put money down, maybe not at the best time because we closed on my house in 2008 and we all know what happened with real estate and mortgages in 2008.
It sounds like it worked out well for you.
Yeah.
Still in the same home?
I'm still in the same home. I laughingly try to explain to my friends. I had a friend in town yesterday from San Diego. The friend that I travel with a lot internationally, she's from the Boston area. And I try to explain to them, politics in North Carolina. And I said, I've been in the same house since March of 2008. And I have been in the 12th, 13th, and 14th Congressional District. I am now back in the 12th. And I said, my house hasn't moved. The borders of the districts have moved. So it kind of helps explain politics here when you say, I am physically still in the same place.
Right.
My congressional district has moved around. Yeah.
Well, here you are. You've had... You worked before you went to Bank of America. You've
Yes.
had jobs since working at Bank
Yes.
of America. You're in Charlotte. You now are the founder and CEO of Beck Insights. Do you feel as though you've found your way and found yourself professionally now? Or do you see a future that might involve more changes and more new ventures?
I mean, it might. You never know what you come across. For me personally, I am my work-life balance is way better because I determine, right? My schedule is my schedule.
Right.
I am on a monthly retainer, so they're not paying me hourly, but I usually don't sit in pointless meetings. And I love learning new things. And so going into different businesses feeds that need to learn new things. And so I'm learning different industries. I'm dealing with different people, like how they do things and, how is the environment impacting you, right? Tariffs for an auto parts business or loss of government funding for people who bid public works, that kind of thing. So how do we keep moving and, help you keep going in this, environment?
Well, Joanna Beck, it's a great pleasure meeting you. And
Thank you.
I appreciate your spending time with me on the Charlotte Ledger podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening. This episode was produced by Lindsey Banks. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger by visiting thecharlotteledger.com.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.